Hi, this is TB's guy. My voice is a little bit shot because I just finished doing an 8-hour stream of, like, critique and review of every single character card in Legends of Runeterra, like the artwork on it. Now, asking people to watch an 8-hour stream is maybe a little bit much, so I've split it up into more manageable chunks by region, and you can watch each of them individually and find the rest of them on the playlist that contains them on my main channel. But if you do want to watch, like, the whole thing because you're crazy or doing some kind of Iron Man challenge or because you're secretly desperately in love with me and every moment you spend with me is a moment that you don't spend with your crippling loneliness, then the full stream, the whole goddamn thing, is over on my second channel, youtube.com/2bskyen. There's a link to that down in the description, and also I write out the link on screen because it's not that hard to type into a address bar. Anyway, we start with Demacia. Enjoy. Hello, cardigans and cartographers. My name is TB Skyen, and welcome to Legends of Runeterra. Now, I've already been playing this game a little bit today, earlier on stream, because I got access to it unexpectedly. I don't know why, but hey, I did. That's nice to have access to the video game, because that means we can look at the cards in-game rather than having, like, I have this giant-ass folder of just card art that I was able to download from the internet, but it wasn't organized. I didn't know which region what necessarily belonged to, and it was a hell of a thing. So fortunately, I got access to the actual video game, so now we can look at the art in the actual thing. Thank goodness. Trouble is, I woke up, got access to the game, had a little bit of breakfast, and then I streamed gameplay of the game. And now, I've barely had any food to eat, so we're gonna have to do some eating, while we do this. Sorry if I'm sounding like I've got stuff in my mouth. Rest assured, it is only fries and pizza. So, we're gonna split this up by region, because fortunately, the in-game client lets you do that, and we're not going to be looking at the spells, specifically. Because, generally speaking, there's not that much to say about them, except, hey, they look nice, I suppose, pretty. But not a lot of stuff is happening in them that I'm particularly interested in talking about. So we're going to stick to the units. We're going to stick to the characters. Will this VOD be available? Yes, of course. Of course it will. Yeah, I'm going to probably leave it on this channel for a while and then move it over to my second channel later. 3 hours for Nier Automata stream 2. No, we're not going to do Nier Automata today. Not today. But we're going to start with Lucian, since he's the first card who's on the table here. And Lucian, of course, is joined by his lovely lady wife, Senna, who notably looks a little bit different, I think, in her normal outfit than she does in the Senna animated short that we took a look at, which is interesting. Like, I don't know how much, I haven't had a look at her splash art recently, but I think they made some character design changes between this and her resurrection, as it were. Now, Necrit is already doing full read-throughs and, like, breakdowns of all of the lore text of the various regions, and if you really want to know, like, the lore behind each of the individual pieces of art, he's doing really good videos about that. So I recommend that you head on over there. For our purposes, we're going to be looking at the artwork, and I hate to be a broken record or anything, but we're going to talk about this a lot. There's more than a few cards where we're going to have a little bit of a chat about that waistline, because I don't mind, like, I don't generally mind characters who are, is Senna underneath Lucian? Yeah, there she is. I don't generally mind characters that are, like, stylized, that, like, streamlined. They've got a little bit of extra stuff going on, like, in terms of, like, we're exaggerating a little bit how lithe and slender they are. But this is, like, there's a limit. Like, where is her organs supposed to go? And that's a problem for the artwork, unfortunately, here, because what we get here, like, the idea of making her so skinny and slender for the purpose of this post is that it kind of enhances the line of action, which goes something like this. And I can kind of see what they're trying to do, But between the way that her corset thing kind of highlights the shape of her form and the way that her upper torso is like, she's almost being spaghettified because, like, here's her hips. Like, her hips are there, and her ribcage is up here. So how is her midriff stretching that far? Like, it's a little bit, it's not great. And it feels a lot like the priority was to make her skinny rather than to make the artwork look right. And that also leads to an awkwardness, like, especially like you see with the breasts, like the way that her body is turned, where the upper body is pointing this way, like she's shooting that way outwards, but her upper body is kind of turning more in a curve that suggests she's supposed to go downwards, and that's a little bit, that's some inconsistency that's kind of unfortunate. And it feels like that's done mostly in the service of just making her thin, rather than in the service of communicating the artwork of the piece itself. And that's a bit of a pity. And you can kind of see that happening here as well, because, like, the action line for Senna is that something's charging at her from over here, right? And she's firing back at it. So she's doing the same thing Lucian is doing, which is like she's slowly retreating from something, but firing back at it. But where Lucian's line of action is very clear. Like, you start up here and you kind of go in a curve like this down through his body, like he's doing this cool, badass, leaning back and firing thing. With Senna, it's a little bit, because of the curvature of her spine, we get a action line that goes like this, right? But then we get, like, her head is pointing this way, so we get an action line that goes and then kind of cuts into there, and then it tries to go this way. And so the action line is not clear. Like, she doesn't have that clear line of action, and it's not really it's not as dynamic as it really should be. And that thinness, like, again, I just look at that and I go, but where are her internal organs supposed to go? She has kidneys, right? A liver? Does she have guts? I hope she can eat, because there's not a lot of room for it. Holy crap. Also, she only has 3 fingers on one hand. I don't know if that's a mistake or just because of the way they drew it this time. Anyway, Lucian and Senna. I like the lighting that's going on here. Like, I like the use of, like, the bright lights, especially to highlight Lucian's face here. And, like, to the way that you see this circular shade that he's destroying, right? How that kind of creates a circle of light that becomes a light source for his face. And that's quite nice. And I like the effects, like this lens flare distortion effect that's going on here is quite nice. But Senna's poses are just... Ooh, I think they should have had another couple of passes in editing, to be honest. So let's take a look at Lucian in his level 2 version, his own specific card art. And here there's a really cool concept at play, because we're basically seeing the aftermath of Lucian shooting something. Like, he's just blasted a hole through some unfortunate Shadow Isles goop monster of some kind. I would have liked it a little bit more if he had his arm out extended and was, like, pointing a gun at the viewer through the hole, and you get that smoking gun kind of feeling, because then you could really have worked with exaggerated perspective and really kind of sold the dynamism. But this cross-arm pose is also pretty cool. And you also, in terms of, like, his character expression, like here, he's serious, right? He's serious, and he's got the Lucian anger brows going on. But it's a different, like, here he's not just serious, he's like, I'm going to murder everything and also everyone. Like, it goes up a level in intensity, which makes sense because he only goes into this form when Senna dies. One minor thing, though, look at Lucian's eyebrows here. There's straight lines, basically. But here, he's got those little hooks at the end of them. And that's a weird inconsistency, which tells me that these two pieces were probably done by 2 different artists, and they weren't looking at the same concept art or something along those lines. Anyway, moving on to Fiora. Now, again, here, again, Fiora is very thin and slender, and that's, but here it works a lot better, because as you can see, there's a clear line of action. Like, there's a clear straight S-curve, and then her feet planted, that works really well with the body, and so you can kind of forgive it a little bit. You can kind of go, okay, yeah, it's a stylization. Sure, fair enough. I mean, there still isn't room for internal organs, but alright, fine, whatever. You can kind of work with it, because the line of action is actually selling what she's doing properly. I would maybe have liked to see a little bit more, like, a little bit more of an extreme pose, Like, where, because she's just done this sweep, and that's leading her sword up there, that maybe she's, like, was more outstretched and in more of a key pose, like more of an extreme. But it worked perfectly fine, and I really like the framing, because you can see the body of the guy who's falling, as well as the curvature of her sword. It creates this internal frame in the image, and that means it draws our eyes to Fiora instantly, and that's just, compositionally, that's just really good, because it means you're not accidentally looking over here, or at the dudes in the background, or any of the other stuff. You're looking at Fiora immediately, because she's framed by the image as being the center point of it, even though she's not the center of the image, and that works really, really well. I also like that there's these dudes down here giving points. It's like holding up like X, two strikes, you're out. And that's lovely. I also do like I do like the construction of the guy who's falling, because you really do get the sense that like his legs have been swept away from under him, and his entire upper body is just crashing down where it is. Okay. And I do like the progression also. Like, Fiora has a progression in her level up, level 2, the same way Lucian does. In that here, they're in the middle of the tournament, clearly. And then here, she has won the tournament because you have defeated 4 foes, or 3 foes, whatever it is, which gets Fiora the trophy and gets her on the list. And this guy, by the way, he's gonna show up later. And I think maybe that guy as well. But this is a good opportunity to talk about the way that these cards use light and shadow. Oh, thank you for the super chats. I completely missed those. Naika, thank you for working hard on all the new videos. Thank you very much. And Finixu, I don't know what the currency that is, but thank you very much. So, light and shadow. Look how it's being used. Again, we talked about the framing in the Fiora picture, right? Like, Fiora has a framing that kind of sets her up. And the same thing is happening here. The sunlight, you can see the line of light and shadow that kind of is implied to run across here, and which then falls across their faces, highlights the 3 characters in the middle of the image. Whereas all these guys in the background, like, if you zoom in on these guys, they're just little smears. Like, they've barely got detail going on them, because they're not important. And because they're in shadow, because they're less bright, our attention is immediately drawn to the characters. And for my money, at least, the first thing I see when I look at this image isn't Fiora. The first thing I see is this guy. I see his disappointment and his like, I'm better than that girl. Like his pouty sourpuss disappointment. That's the first thing I see. Then I see Fiora, and then I see the third place guy who has some goddamn class about it, and isn't like a whiny little coward about it. And that works quite well. And here's where I want to talk about character design, because all credit to Studio 6 Vodka, who did a lot of the artwork for this game. There's some really solid character design going on. Like, look at this guy's massive, like those happy cheekbones and that pointed little nose and that kind of rodent-like grin. Like, he looks like a character. And the same thing goes for this guy. Like, he looks like there's some character going on in his face. This guy has seen some shit. He's got an interesting jawline. There's some stuff going on there. And that's something, again, we're going to be coming back to. By contrast, this is more shade to League of Legends. They're old character designers than anything else. A lot of League of Legends characters, especially the women, just aren't that interesting when it comes to faces. Like, they have, like, perfect lips, perfect eyes, perfect aquiline nose, and no cheekbones, really, and the same jawline. And that's something where I feel like a lot of the old League of Legends character designs are being put a little bit to shame by some of the artwork on display here. Let's see. Moving on to Lux. Lux, who's had a bit of a glow-up, a bit of an upgrade. No more fucking boob plates.
No more frickin' boob plates. Finally!
I'm quite happy about this, because the boob plates on Lux's armor has always been a bad character design element. First of all, because Lux's storyline fundamentally is about her being a young girl who's not an adult yet. Like, that's the main thing about her. Is that she's someone who's struggling with identity, someone who's struggling with adulthood, who's caught on the cusp between being an adult who has to take a side in the Demacian conflict, and a child who can still shelter in the house, under the protection of her family of Crown Guard. And one of the best ways to indicate, especially for like a female character, that they are that they're not adults yet is to not give them adult proportions, and the boob plates just highlighted,
Hey, there's titty over here, guys! Titty! We've got boobies!
like, and that just, like, no, because what you're supposed to give us is the impression that she's trying to remain a child. Like, that's what Lux is doing. She's trying to stay a child. She doesn't want to grow up, but she wants... It's that Disney princess conflict, right? Where, like, Ariel wants, I want more, but she doesn't want to give up her childish toys. She doesn't want to deal with the consequences of her actions. That's the kind of story that Lux is playing through. And so removing the boot plate's good. Anyway, that was a long rant about a thing that isn't that important. Again, with the tiny, tiny waist, but again, because Lux has a much better pose, like, that tiny little waist is like, yeah, whatever, but you can forgive it because it serves the posture that she's holding. Where, again, you can see there's this lovely line of action that kind of guides her around the light that she's looking at in her own hands. And speaking of light, by the way, something I really like is that the light in her hands, like, there's full-on sunlight coming blaring through the canopy of the trees and stuff, but this is the most powerful light, right? This light is more powerful than the natural light. It's grabbing her attention. And again, you can see how these circles of light that kind of bend around here, they lead the eye, so your eye follows them, and oh, hey, there's Lux's face. There's our character. And the composition on many of these card arts is just absolutely brilliant. I also like that as viewers, we're kind of put in a perspective where it kind of looks like we're spying on her. Like, we're looking at her and she doesn't know we're there because she's trying to do this in secret. Like, she's trying to explore her magical powers in secret. Which, again, is a tiny little storytelling thing. And again, of course, the leaves around here also frame the character art absolutely excellently. Which, again, like, a lot of these arts, you'll see there's a hell of a lot of detail and a lot of busyness going on in them. Like, lots of stuff in the background, lots of things, but because the composition is rock solid, we get led to the character, and the characters are highlighted, they're separated well from the background, and that's why it doesn't get kind of stressful to look at. And again, with Lux, there's a clear progression where we go from her exploring her magical power to her very explicitly using it, but there's a different progression happening as well. Here, we are in springtime, or summer, or something along those lines. You can see, like, all the leaves are green. Like, it's sunny, it's a bright summer's day, but here, well, all the sunlight is gone. In fact, all of the light is gone. It seems to be nighttime or late afternoon, and all the leaves are wilted. And this is clearly the autumn of some future time period from where she was. Which, it gives that sense of progression that she's gone from exploring, oh, I can do magic sparkles with my fingers, to Final Flash! Like, going full Vegeta on us. And again, tiny, tiny waist, but a solid pose sells it. And I really like this pose, actually, like, for the dynamic it has with the character, in that you get the sense that she's almost kind of being pushed back by the power she's unleashing. And you can see how the light beam is kind of complete Dragon Ball style. It's blowing away the leaves and, like, kind of clearing the ground in front of her completely with just the sheer force of pressure. Now, the boot plates are a little bit back here, which I think is unusual, again, because, like, they're so very clearly not here in this one, but it doesn't seem like she's got a different set of armor. So I don't know if they thought in terms of, oh, this is a progression, this is like Lux 3-5 years down the line when she's grown up a little bit. Maybe that's what they're trying to do there. But yeah, and again, like, I really do think a lot of the women in these arts are too thin. Like, where the thinness is distracting, where you kind of go, hey, oh, hang on, you, where's your liver supposed to be? But maybe that's just me. Moving on to her dear brother Garen, again, where there's a progression in what's going on in the character art. Here, we see Garen sort of in his element. He's surrounded by Demacian soldiers. They're doing Demacian stuff, discussing Demacian things. He's the captain of the guard, yada, yada, yada. And again, notice the framing. So we have these columns behind us, which kind of tell us, okay, the background here isn't important. That girl is going to be important, but we'll talk about her later. The background here isn't really important, and we've got the lighting as well, where you can see these guys, these other Demacian soldiers, are almost completely in shade. Like, they've got barely any highlights on them, but Garen is being caught in a sunbeam, So you can see that complete highlighting of, like, there's a highlight running across his face that really lights him up. He's got brighter highlights on his armor. He's got that golden light kind of enveloping him, which again makes him stand out. You can really see that here. Like, they're wearing the same armor, him and the other soldiers, right? The same color armor, but this guy, he's all obscured by a dust cloud. He's all dusted out and fades into the background while Garen stands out without being super brightly colored or anything. And that, again, is just compositionally, this is just really good. Anyway, that girl right there, that lady, she's gonna come up again later. So remember her. Hood, brown hair, carrying a bag, looking a little bit forlorn, perhaps. And notice Garen's hair, by the way, also. His hairdo and his face. That, too, shall change a little bit. Here, Garen's hair is longer. So like Lux, we have that time progression that we go from an earlier point in his history to somewhere, presumably during the Mage rebellions or some kind of conflict that he's fighting in. Where his hair is a little bit longer, he looks a little bit older, a little bit more angry, generally speaking. And again, it's the light that's being used to highlight Garen. Like, again, here he's in the center of the image and the whole image revolves around him, so it's not like you can miss him. But the light, again, you can see in the contrast with the other soldiers, is very bright and very clear, like giving him this outline around him. And you can also kind of see the framing, like, of the line of soldiers, kind of creating a little bit of sectioned off window here for Garen's upper body and his outstretched sword arm to be in, which again is compositionally very excellent. Something else to notice about Demacia, especially, is that a lot of the time, unless we're really, really close up on other soldiers, like soldiers that aren't heroes, their faces are really obscured. Like, a lot of the time, they really barely show us anything. You can barely see the identity of each individual Demacian soldier. And that's something that's a bit interesting because a lot of the Noxians actually do show off who they are. They do show off what they look like in a much more specific way. Which leads us on to Citria of Cloudfield. And again, compositionally, this is just an excellent picture. But there we go. That's the girl who is walking by casually as Garen is discussing with his soldier mates in there. And that's something else I love about these cards, is that the studio has tried really hard to get a lot of continuity and a lot of progression between the different cards where you can kind of follow little interesting storylines here and there. What are my thoughts on Bilgewater and their characters? My thoughts are they are not in this game, and I have got like 380 cards to go through, and it's taking a while already. So, I don't have time to answer any other questions about regions that aren't in the game. Anyway, Citria of Cloudfield. Again, we've talked about this many times already, but look at the framing. Like, the gate that she's just walked through is framing her. These two soldiers are blocking out, like, the front of the image and are framing her. And the light that's coming down, again, this guy's in shadow, this guy's in shadow, these people are in shadow, this is in shadow, these lights aren't as bright. She's being highlighted, literally, by the light. And it's gorgeous. Like, it's absolutely gorgeous. I do love also the distinction between, like, look at the ways in which the native Demacians, or the city Demacians dress, right? And she's clearly from the sticks. Like, this is good character design. You can see this girl is from the countryside. Her pants have been mended many times over. She's wearing this tunic that's completely kind of ragged and has clearly been worn for a long time. She's got these sleeves made of feathers, basically. Whereas Demacians from the city tend to be wearing much more stylized and much more fine-looking outfits. So she stands out. Also color-wise, like, there's plenty of brown and stuff here, but none of the other Demacians in the image are wearing a full outfit only made of brown, basically. So there's just lots of good little character design details going around here. I also like that you can see a boy chasing chickens in the background. That's a lovely little detail. And look at that face over here. Like, this is just a tiny detail, but something I really appreciate about the extra characters that are being created for this game. Only white humans. No, there's people of color here, actually. Specifically, if you take a look at this dude here, seems to be a person of color, and you'll see plenty of other people of color in the Demacian card art. That's something they've done quite well. Like, they seem to have made an effort to include people of color, which is nice. Like, that's something that can often fall by the wayside, early Magic, for example. Anyway, moving on. So we have the Fleet Feather Tracker. Now, remember how I said a lot of Demacian card art doesn't highlight the face? And here you can see this guy is still a Demacian soldier, but his helmet design is different, which allows for the helmet to be open enough that he's you can get his expression while he's being chased down by this very angry bird. Now, there's not a lot going on in this image. I will highlight the ways in which, like, you can see the blurring happening all around the edges and around and stuff in the background, which gives the sense of speed, like the horse is charging forward. And then there's the horse, which is practically foaming at the mouth and kind of almost screaming because it's clearly being pushed at a full gallop to get away from this frickin' bird. Which is quite nicely done. So here we have a Mage Seeker. And the reason I can tell he's a Mage Seeker is because he's got this thing. Also, he's a Mage Seeker Conservator. But character design-wise, that half mask right there, that's a hallmark of the Mage Seekers in Demacia, and we're going to see that crop up later. And he seems to be holding one of Thresh's keys in his hands. Like, Thresh has these keys on his belt. So where he got a hold of that, I don't know. I'm wondering whether he's going to be all right. I hope so. Oh, hang on. Did we just get disconnected? Okay, I think it disconnected for a second there. Okay, we're back. Okay, good. Excellent. So, this guy, again, what I talked about. Unlike a lot of League of Legends characters, there's some character on this guy's face. Like, you can see he's got a little mole or something right there, like a little bump of some kind. He's got lines on his face, and age and experience, which is something that's kind of rare in League of Legends characters. Even Ryze doesn't really have that much experience on his face when you look at the way his character design is created. I do like look at the way he's holding up the key, right? He's like two fingers, keeping the rest of his hand like away from it, like he's picking it up like it's a spider or something that disgusts him. Because of course it is. It's a magic item, and he's a mage seeker who hates magic, so that's what he does. Oh yeah, fire Scott Gelb, Anna. I agree. He should definitely not be COO of Riot anymore. Jesus Christ. I also like his expression. Like, you can see the suspicion and distrust in his eyes as he looks at this thing. And again, here's being something that's being done quite nicely with color grading. The key is giving off this greenish light, and that creates this patch of green right here in the middle of the image, like also light that splashes onto the features of the character, and that contrasts nicely with the dark grays and blues of the background, and again, creates a zone of interest, a zone of draw, so that you look at the keys first, and then you look at the guy's hands and his eyes and stuff like that, and your view kind of expands from there, and you notice the background last, which is usually good. Like, a lot of the time, you don't want someone to be looking at the background of a picture first. Again, look at this. This is some lovely character design, except I'm not sure it's character design. Well, it is, but I think, and I could be wrong about this, but I think these are caricatures of real people. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was Studio Vodka, for example, who have, fuck Mage Seekers. You're right about that, Oriole. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Six Vodka who have inserted some of their friends or even themselves into the picture, because these characters look very, very specifically like caricatures. Like, they look very specifically like they are someone. But even if they're not, lovely character design. Look at the difference between them, like in facial construction, in terms of like how their lips, how their cheekbones, how their expressiveness is rendered. I like that a lot. Anyway, this Poro is fucking adorable. I love Poro so much. Do you know what the first thing was when I got into Legends of Runeterra? I made a deck with nothing but Poros and Braum. And I won. I won 3 games in a row with that deck, because Poros are fucking amazing. Anyway, once again, the light is highlighting the character. You can see the trees that are kind of twisting around him, like the boughs of the trees and the tree trunks, which continues into this line of light. So you get this circle here that highlights the Poro. And then, because these guys are also quite well highlighted by the light of the scene, you also start looking at, oh, these soldiers here. observing the Poro and being like, that's my helmet he's walking away with. But he's also so cute, I can't take it away from him. I don't know what to do. So that's adorable. And I love the fluffiness of these Poros. And I love that he has a little band-aid on his ass. Like he's already been in trouble before. Which is lovely because in-game, this Poro has the toughness trait, which means he takes less damage from everything that hits him. But yeah, just a lovely bit of detail going on here. Then we have the Battlesmith. And I originally, when I saw this card for the first time, I thought it was a Freljord card. Because of the ships and the general coldness of the scene. Oh, Draco Lord, thank you. Keep up the great work. I'll try. This is going to be a long-ass stream, you guys. We're half an hour in, and we've done, what? 5, 10 cards. And there's 380. So this could be a while. Now, again, there's nothing spectacular about this card that we haven't already kind of talked about. Like, again, the framing of the workplace and, like, the anvil and all of this creates this little window within the frame where this guy's being highlighted by the light of the forge that gives him this warm light as compared to the kind of gray, cold, damp-looking environment that he's in. He's got this warm light from the fire that highlights him and gives him a kind of human warmness that our eyes are immediately attracted to. I really like that he's not looking at us. Like, he's not looking out towards the audience. He's not really acknowledging the audience at all. He's absorbed in his work. Like, the work is the thing that matters to him. And again, that's a bit of character exploration. We can see what kind of person he is from his body language, from the way that he conducts himself in his environment. And I also love the metal textures on this anvil. Like, look at those. Those are really good metal textures. Absolutely lovely. The only thing I'd criticize is this fire here. Like, this fire looks more like a sketch of what the fire is supposed to look like. Like, this looks like an early color exploration, or like an early set of layers, and it doesn't look like they finished rendering it. It looks a little bit too... I can see the brush... like, the brush repetition in this thing. And that fire could have been rendered a little bit better. They can't make it too bright, because then it takes away the attention from the smith, but they could have done a little bit more with that. Whew! I'm trying to move as fast as I can because there's so many fucking cards. So, again, framing. Right away, we have the framing here, which frames the horde of monsters that's coming at this poor guy. And that framing then is repeated, because we have the frame here showing the monsters, then we have this, like the horn, which then frames the sentinel himself as he's looking down over the wall. So you have this double frame composition thing that I feel like they're a little bit in conflict with each other because the horn overlaps the edge of the pit, which kind of breaks the frame for the monster horde, but at the same time it also works really well, because like you immediately know where to look here and here in order to see what's going on. And I really dig the perspective. Like, I love the fucking perspective in this image. This is like a 3-point distorted extreme, like there's almost a fisheye lens effect going on here, where we're really getting this look from above and down, but also these very exaggerated, like, distortions of size as we move up closer and closer to the camera. And that's really hard to pull off. Like, pulling off effects like this and making it look convincing is fucking difficult. It's the mark of a very talented artist to do something like that. And again, the Sentinel isn't looking outward. And that's something like, you know those fucking mobile games that are like copies of Clashing of Clans or whatever. And like every single goddamn icon for all of them is some guy screaming, like some icon of a cartoon guy shouting with his mouth open, like ah, right? That's a classic way to draw the eye, because the human brain is attracted to faces. We like faces. We seek out faces instinctively. It's called marketing. Yes, you're right, Kevril. It's a marketing tactic. And what I see a lot, especially in artwork and card games, is artists who are young who kind of make the same mistake. In the sense that they are constantly tempted to have characters look out at the audience, constantly tempted to have the face visible in the frame. And I like that these cards like, with this guy and with the Battlesmith both, and with some of, like, the Demacia soldiers and stuff, there's plenty of times where the artists here know that, no, we don't need to see the character in the face, we just need to see them looking at something else. Someone asked if this picture was drawn within the golden mean. I would stress, like, if you draw the composition lines, then yes, like, this guy's head is right in the golden ratio for this particular corner of the map, and this crab is more or less in the right place for that. Like, yeah, you could definitely draw, like, a golden ratio diagram over this thing and get something good out of it. But the golden ratio is a little bit overhyped as a compositional tool. Like, it's not magic. There's no magic about it. It just works the way it should. And again, faces. You don't see the face, first of all. First of all, you see the shield and the arrow that has been deflected. But here, notice how, remember how I said that a lot of the time with Demacians, you don't get to see the face. Like, a lot of the time, the faces are basically ignored a little bit. They're kept in shadow, they're kept covered up. Here, the artists are making really good use of showing the faces. You can see the eye of the protector here, who's like, holy shit, I just barely caught this thing, and this guy, I almost died. Like, you can see the shock and surprise in his face and sort of the intense concentration in hers to get to this position in time to save the guy, which I really like, which is very well done. And again, not because they've altered the helmet design to show more of the face, but because they're tilting her head back and letting her face, like, what's there of her face is highlighted by light, and they're doing the same thing over here. You can see this sliver of light highlighting the dude's face here, but not the other eye, which gives us access to their expressions without altering the character design. Again, with the, like, this guy is, like, twice as wide across the midriff as the lady. And I don't hang out with a lot of women soldiers, but I'm reasonably convinced they also need to have abdominal muscles in order to wear giant suits of armor and carry big shields around. So it's a little Like, why are you making her look sexy? She's saving a guy from death. She doesn't need to be thick. Like, she just needs to be actually thick and full of muscles so she can do stuff. Ah, well. Back to the Mage Seekers. Again, the half mask. Oh yeah, actually, we should talk about the background. Actually, there was a thing in the background. I'm not that interested in the trebuchets; they're fine. But look at the battlefield. Look at all the footprints in the mud. That was a detail I really liked about this. Is there's footprints in the mud. There's lots of evidence of activity, that people have been running back and forth, and that these fields, which used to have grass in them, you can see the clumps of grass kind of mixed in with the mud, but that they've been trampled down by the tides of war, basically. Oh, Kalimil Schut Kamshoi, thank you. Your channel is fascinating. I gotta thank my brother for showing me a Danish YouTuber that doesn't make you lose faith in humanity. Skål fra Aarhus! Skål! Let's see. Right, moving on. Mage Seeker Investigator. This is a turf. This is definitely, yeah. But remember how I talked about how the half mask is an emblem of the Mage Seekers in Demacia. And that's a really effective little design element, because as you can see, this is not remotely the same mask as on our previous Mage Seeker, the Conservator, right here. Like, this is a completely different mask, but because it has that same covering, that quarter of the head, basically, you get the sense, oh, they're from the same people. Like, these are from the same organization of some kind. And I quite like that. I also like, again, the framing. You can see, not only is Lux hiding behind the door, but the door is putting up a literal wall between her and the Mage Seeker, and you can see that reflected in the light as well. Here, the light is red and kind of low and quiet and kind of hiding away. And out here, you have the bright, unforgiving, like, really sheer white light of day. That Lux does not want to be caught in, because she's a mage, and that's a bad thing to be when you're a Demacian crown guard. So there's this contrast between this bright, white, unforgiving, like, revealing light and this soft, gentle, red, almost pinkish hiding light in here, being separated by this literal, like, barrier in the image between them, which, again, compositionally is really, really good. And again, Lux is like, girl, Eat a steak, just one. Just eat one steak, please. You need it. Good lord. But yeah, and you can also see the disdain and just the danger in her face. Like, if you don't give her what she wants, she's going to become dangerous, and you can tell that right away. So, Vanguard Defenders. Here we see them fighting some Shadow Isles bastards. And, here, have a look at the light here, again. This is hagiography, basically. Mage Seeker Karen wants to speak to your manager. Yeah, oh, she's definitely called Karen. That's her canonical name now. Riot, make it so. She's called Karen. Anyway, this is hagiography. What we got going on here is a use of light as storytelling and as ennobling, especially in Christian iconography, which is something that Demacia already pulls very heavily from. Especially something like Christian iconography. Often there's this association with the light of heaven, which is being used as a halo around the backs of the heads of saints, for example. Like, that's a really common set of imagery, and here it's being used completely shamelessly to valorize this Demacian soldier who's charging pretty much like single-handed into a platoon of these Shadow Isles bastards. And I do like that he's stepping on one of these guys' head, and he's literally stepping his head into his chest. That's like a good detail. But basically, the light is sanctifying him. It's ennobling him. It's making a saint out of him. It's making a hero out of him. And you can see it being like completely, the clouds are breaking open right behind him and the sunlight is bursting through as this brave warrior valiantly charges into the fray, protecting the world from the unholy abominations of the Shadow Isles, yada yada. And the framing again is here. You can see, like, the light is framing him first of all, and you can see that there is this viewport kind of being created in the middle of the image, especially with this guy blocking out much of the lower quarter of the image here. That really highlights him. And it's just like the lighting in these cards is just so immaculate. Like, it's so good. You can see the bloom and the bleed of the light around the edge of the character, but you can also still sense that there's texture and shape and form underneath it. That's really fucking hard to do. Like, that's just from like a color perspective. And I do like that you can see that the cape is translucent, like a little bit. You can see that the cape is also being lit up by the light from behind him, which again, color-wise, it's kind of hard to learn how to do those glow colors correctly. I do like that people in chat are like, the defender is non-binary, and yeah, I mean, how would you know? Canonically, sure, why not? There's no reason not to. And this may be my favorite Demacian card, by the way. Just because of this guy. Just because of this fucking guy. Look at that face! Ah! Look at him. It's like, if you saw that coming at you. Like, yeah, fucking run, man. Look at that guy. Oh, it's such a good expression. Oh my god, it's so good. But I just like that they're battle chefs. Like, they're combat chefs. They're chefs who fight people with frying pans and rolling pins and punch them in the face. That's just, I want to know more about these guys. I want a comic book about their adventures. I want the next animated series to be about these guys having bro adventures, punching Noxians and making food for the poor. It's such a good look. I also like that this guy has double chins. Like, he's got a big, fat, round face. He's got double chins. He's got lots of lines. He's got a big, rotund body. Because he's a chef. Of course he loves food. He should love food. And that's something that's so rare, is that, like, fat characters in fantasy video games especially tend to be made entirely about being fat. Like, that's someone like Gragas, for example, who's like, his whole thing is that he's a fat, drunk, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's so much everything he is pretty much about being the big, fat, brawling, drunk bastard. But this guy's like, no, he's got a nice ponytail, and he's got that bitch and soul patch, and he's got a frying pan. He's about to kick the ass of some Noxian asshole with an axe who has no idea what's about to happen to him. And he's about so much more than that, but he's also fat. right? Like where a character design that uses that as an attribute without making it the whole of the character, which I'm quite happy with. And there's also just other good little details hanging around in the picture, like the guy over here who's trying to control the horse and having absolutely no success. And this poor Noxian just getting decked to the ground by Captain Daddy over here. Like, these Noxians just have no idea what's... Like, they did not expect this at all. Like, they were like, oh, chefs, we can handle that. No. It's such a good image, and I like the flying vegetables that are like, they're clearly springing into action, the dynamism of the whole scene. And again, the light is doing the framing. Our heroes are highlighted, literally, brightened up by the light, while our villains, the Noxians, are all in shadow and shade and not being highlighted at all. And we get clear sense of these guys' character. We see their faces, we see what they're like. And the Noxians is like, we barely get to see any of who they are because they're not important, they're not the heroes. Oh my god, it's just fucking that guy. He's so good. I want him to... I'm gonna make an icon out of his face, and I'm gonna use that on social media. Swear to god. It's gonna take hours? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. This is going to take hours. This is gonna... I have pizza and fries in front of me, because this is gonna take a long time. They're getting cold, but they're still good. And I'm trying to go fast because he's pansexual. Yes, he's pansexual. Anyway, what? Someone said what? How the fuck is there 1,100 people here watching me do this? Holy shit. Hello? Hi. What are you all doing here? Anyway, Dawn speakers. These are clearly religious preachers of some kind. Presumably preaching the religion of Kale, as it were. And again, everything we've talked about before applies completely here. You can see them, they're highlighted with the light, and you can see this right here, like the little patch of light in the middle of the image centers our eyes on them. You can see the framing of the parishioners that are sitting around listening to them talk, helping guide our eyes to the two people who are preaching. I don't know why they're talking over each other. That's a little bit weird. And then again, look at the character design on these characters in the background. You've got the black dude over here, like with this lovely little jawline and like the receding hairline thing going on. We've got this girl with her lovely pointed little nose and like pointed little face. Like she's got a slightly mousy face, which looks lovely. And then we have this old dude with his weathered face and these big, powerful cheekbones. And this broken nose, kinda, sitting there with his hands, too. Like, those hands, they look like they've seen a lot of farm work, right? Like, they look like they're hands that have done something with their lives. And again, this girl right here, who has a completely different facial profile than this one down here, and another nose that pokes out, and like, there's lots of character to these characters. Like, there's a sense that these are all individual people who lead very different lives outside of their function as parishioners for these two preachers right here. Ba-da-da. And speaking of character, don't you just hate this guy the moment you see him? Like, don't you just hate this guy the instant you lay eyes on him? Isn't he literally the worst person you've ever met? This piece of crap, this asshole, this douchebag, no one likes him. He's an asshole. Oops, had to put someone in timeout there. What a jerk. Let's punch him, let's shove him in a locker, right? And that's the power of character design with this guy. Instantly, you get the sense that this is some kind of self-important, self-obsessed, snooty little dandy boy. Like, who's just like, you see him coming and you're just like, oh my god, Chad, not today. Fucking, I don't want to hear about your yacht. I don't care what you were doing at the country club. Go away, I have bills to pay. And that's character design. Like, that's all that character, like that smile, he's got this gleaming smile that doesn't look sincere. He's got this self-impressed look on his face because he's managing to win over a dummy. And he's got this very put-on air. Like, contrast him with the fencer in the background. This kid right here, who's clearly taking this shit seriously, and then this guy here who's more obsessed with making the perfect pose in front of this training dummy that he has just bravely slain. And again, light is highlighting him while it's hiding away everything else in the image a little bit. But that's just like, again, this is good character design. Like, I'm not shitting on the character design. I'm saying this is amazing character design because I instantly know how much I don't want to talk to this guy ever. Which again is hard to do. Like, that demands an instinct for character and an instinct for you know, making character apparent. And contrast with this guy, just in terms of how he's still got that smile, right? And he's still got the long blonde hair, but this is a very different character. This is someone who's not really interested in looking good, but who's very interested in breaking the face of whoever it is he's fighting right now. But yeah, these are Laurent's, there's a Laurent duelist and a Laurent protege. Let's see, what's his... He seemed a preeming fop with an expensive blade. Turns out he really knew how to swing that sword. I demand a rematch, but I missed his name with that ridiculous accent. Wait, it's because he's a Laurent from the house of Laurent in Demacia? When they speak with ridiculous French accent. Is this guy called Pierre? Oh, God. Anyway, you can again see the difference in character being displayed here. Not that this guy necessarily looks like a nice guy, but he doesn't look as intolerable as the other one. And here's something interesting being done with the light, by the way. Because, again, the face of this guy is hidden in shade, but this guy's being much more highlighted by the light. But also the back of his opponent is being highlighted. And there's this dividing line being created by the body of his opponent that creates a frame for him to exist in, like over here, but which also kind of locks out half of the image, which is a slightly strange compositional decision because it feels like there's a lot of wasted space over here that's just kind of being, oh, there's a big Demacian building and some things that could be spent on something more. Like, it feels like you could move this further to the left in the composition to show more of his pose and do something with it. But that might be a thing of just, like, trying to fit it in a piece of card art. And again, like, there's storytelling here. You can see that this sword has just been shattered by him grabbing onto it with that thing and smacking it with his own blade. And he's very pleased with that. And this guy is like, oh, this is not good. Oh dear, this is not good. Oh, I should definitely not have fought this guy. This is definitely bad. This is bad. I'm gonna get kicked in the face. Oh man, this is bad. Someone's gonna get pissed at him for having the sword broken. Senna, we've already talked about. Here's another person of color, though. A Vanguard Redeemer, and here again, I've been harping on a lot of the women characters for being just way too skinny for what they were supposed to be doing. This lady is the first time where you actually see someone, oh, it looks like she might actually have some abs under there. It's like, it looks like there might actually be some muscle mass somewhere in there with which to swing that sword around. And again, stuff we've already talked about. Like, you can see the lighting doing a good job of highlighting the character, making her brighter than the character here in the background. It's the same trick they used with Garen. Remember how with Garen, one of the Demacian soldiers with him was kind of obscured by dust, kind of? And that's the same thing that's happening here, where this guy is less highlighted by light, this guy is obscured by dust, which means we focus on the girl in the center of the woman, rather, in the center of the image. And I love the draping folds on this cape. Like, look at how well that folds. It doesn't look heavy, but it looks like vast and expansive and heroic and cool. And you can see that repeated in the draping that comes down along her midriff. Like, that's just really nice cloth rendering, I think. And I appreciate that they didn't give her boob plates. Like, it's nice that they didn't give her boob plates. I would have liked it if she had the same kind of armor on as the dudes, but I think she's a commander specifically. Like, she's some kind of leader commander type, and that's why she's being marked out with a different kind of armor. I also love that she has dreadlocks and natural hair, because that's something that, again, when creating characters of color, a lot of video games design tends to not include, like, ever explore the idea of natural hairstyles. Especially on black people, and that's a real pity, because there's a lot of interesting visual information to gain there. Now, here's someone who's really interesting. we've been talking so much about light, right? We've been talking so much about how light is used to highlight characters and really bring them out and make us focus on them. Here, they're doing it in reverse. They're doing it in reverse, where the light is actually kind of obscuring him. There's so much bright light behind him, and he's so dark that he stands out, but he's also not really highlighted. Like, as a character, he kind of disappears a little bit. And what you get instead is the sense of a group, much more, because the group members behind him are being emphasized by the light. And also, like, you get the sense that the group that's coming up behind him is summoning the light, again, like we talked about with the previous Demacian soldier. The hagiography, like the being sanctified by the light, by the rising, dawning sun, which, if you remember from Lord of the Rings, Gandalf charging into the lines of the Uruk-hai at the Battle of Helm's Deep, that's the exact same thing. And because he's not super highlighted with light, we don't really get a sense of the character as himself. Like, he's not really much of a character on his own. There's a determined look in his eyes, and he's got a stern look on his face. But we get a sense of him as a leader of a group of Demacian soldiers coming up behind him, like a real 300 moment. And it makes him look badass as hell, but he's not as much of a character as, for example, the duelist guy from earlier. He's not as much of a character, but he is much more of a representative of the people that are around him. Okay, Laurent Bladekeeper. Again, light highlights the character, centers him in the image, and here there's an interesting framing where between him and the sword, you get this triangular space that his face occupies, that your eye is kind of drawn to, which I think is interesting. Like, I think there's an interesting composition going on here that's not really very complicated, but it works really well, because I keep thinking that the swords on the back wall kind of contribute to it, but they don't really. Like, they are more in conflict with the composition of the character, if anything, and yet it works, which is unusual. And this guy looks like a bit of a Draven, doesn't he? Like, he looks like a bit of a Draven guy. Why are all Demacians in dimly lit areas? Yeah, that's exactly the thing. That's an artistic choice that they're making to really make sure that you have areas in the Demacian card art of really bright light and really a lot of shade and shadow, which is part of the aesthetic of Demacia. And that's something like when we eventually get to the Shadow Isles, you'll see a very different set of compositional choices being used for those characters. But returning to Demacia, where were we? Here. The Laurent Bladekeeper. Again, there's lots of character in the face. He looks like a Draven to me. Like, he looks like that kind of character. Like that kind of, I'm a great duelist. I'm good at doing things. Like that kind of character, because he's got that cocky grin on his face and he's looking at the sword like, oh, the things I could do to people with this thing. Expression. I like the fur. Like, I like that he's wearing this expensive fur-looking coat. It makes him look important. It's been an hour and we're still around half of Demacia. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're gonna be going for a while, son. You should get yourself some food. And again, remember this guy? A Laurent challenger. Presumably a challenger who was going to challenge Fiora. And who was a real cocky, stuck-up little dipshit about it, too. Look at this motherfucker. Like, I mean, look at Fiora up here. And look at Fiora looking at him like, oh my fucking god. Oh my god, you represent our house, dude. Oh my god, you're embarrassing everyone. It's like, why is he in the tournament? Why? And the horse with even more luxurious hair than him. Good grief, Fiora. It's so good. And again, the storytelling in the images. Like, this guy is unimpressed. The children love him because he's big and flashy, and this guy's like, oh, son, you're about to get your entire shit kicked in. Like, he knows what's about to happen to this dude. It's like, oh boy, really? And yeah, the pedal that's landed on top of his head is really good. Because it gives you the impression that he's like a guard whose job it is to stand still all the time. He can't move, so he gets pedals on his head. But yeah, I just love Fiora's like, like that tired, like, oh my god, this motherfucker, god damn. And again, The light highlights the character himself, everything else is in shade. We know exactly where to look and what to look at. Mage, Seeker, Inciter. Long ago, the wild magics of the rune, blah, blah, blah. So this guy is interesting from a lore perspective, because I believe what he has there is like a Petricite staff that's absorbing the magic that's being cast at these Demacian soldiers. But it kind of looks like he's casting magic himself, doesn't it? A little bit. Like, it looks a little bit like he's casting magic, which, given the internal lore of Demacia, is maybe not a great idea. Ah, I need more food. Excuse my chewing noises. Nom nom nom. Anyway, once again, Mage Seeker, that half mask across the face, like that upper quarter of the head. And again, framing, you can see how the light of the magic that's approaching him is creating this circular frame around him. And again, the light of the magic that he's dispelling is highlighting him while keeping everything else relatively in shade. And this is something that, when you're an artist yourself, it's really worth thinking about that stuff. Like, it's worth thinking about, okay, what can I do with, like, light and shadow and composition to highlight the things I want people to look at so that I don't have to work so fucking hard on the background? Because the background over here, these guys, these are just sketches. Like, they're just barely rendered out little smudges of nothing. And because they've done such a stellar job guiding the eye to the main subject of the painting, spending time on the spell effects and the stuff that really shows up in the foreground, you don't have to do hard work on the background. You can just kind of fuck around. Just lay some color shapes down, and like this vaguely shoulder shape, that's fine. And you don't have to worry about it. And we can see that also, we can also see that, by the way, in the Laurent Challenger. Where, again, the characters in the background is like, yeah, they're just kind of smudgy. They're just kind of smudgy and kind of plastered on there. They don't need to be that good, because this guy's grabbing all our attention, and this guy is doing the storytelling. So you can get away with working a lot less if you know where to put your work, like if you know where to put your effort. I also love the lighting effects on the ground, like how you can see it's this bright flash of light that's being shaded in unusual ways by the rocks and the plants that are present on the battlefield. Here we have another excellent use of perspective, and another excellent use of framing, by the way. I wonder if Demacians burn witches like in the Middle Ages. No, they don't burn them. They put them in concentration camps and forcibly torture them with chemicals. If you've read the Lux comic, that's what they do. So, whether that's better or not, I won't comment. Anyway, Silverwing Scout. Look at the perspective going on in this picture. Like, just look from the tail, following all the way into the main body of the griffin, and then that head jutting out towards us. You really get the sense of speed, like the sense of movement on this thing. And that's being emphasized even more. Like, you can see, you know, in manga, when you get the speed lines that all kind of point towards the center, that kind of emphasize the speed of a character moving fast, they're doing that a little bit here. You can see these little streaks of color from some explosion that's happening behind them, but because the explosion progresses outwards from right behind them, and because you have all these arrows and all these like projectiles firing at them, you get that same sense of moving into the front of the picture. Like that same sense of speed, that same sense of kineticism. I think they could have pushed it harder. Like, I think they could have pushed the perspective distortion harder here and really made it pop, but it still looks great. And again, light being used to highlight the characters, everything else is relatively less luminous, except for the shots of magic and fire arrows and stuff that's coming at them. And by the way, she's a scout, right? Like, this is a game? I think I just crashed it. Can you even see it? Is it still being displayed? Yeah, okay. Okay, I think I just crashed the game. Give me a second, I'm gonna try and restart. There we go. Demacia, characters only, please. Thank you. Alright, let's try that again. Again, the character's being highlighted, but this is a scout. This is a Silverwing scout, and you can see that she's carrying parchments with her, which are presumably maps and drawings that she's made of enemy positions and like scouting information that she's made. Same as Teemo is always carrying around scrolls on his back for maps and stuff. And that's just a lovely little bit of detail. So, Silverwing Vanguard. Not a lot to say about these guys, just some cool birds, and I like the tilted composition. Like, we're looking at this from a Dutch angle, like a 45-degree angle where the horizon line is like this way. That just makes it really strong and gives it a nice sense of speed because it looks like the birds are diving, even though they're not. So that works really well. Other than that, not a lot to say. Like, I love the use of blue, red, and yellow in the lighting across the bird's wings, but there's not a lot of detail. There's not a lot of character to talk about there. And again, note the use of light. These characters, again, like I talked about, the soldiers in Demacian art are often not characters on their own. Like that guy who was leading the group, not much of a character on his own, but clearly a leader. And the same thing here, like the faces are visible, but the light isn't doing anything to highlight them. Like they're always kind of in shade a little bit. And they're being framed by light, but they're not they're not highlighted as such. And yes, they are definitely boyfriends. Absolutely. 110% boyfriends. This is the big burly boyfriend protecting his other big burly boyfriend from being hit with arrows while he's carrying the flag. That's basically what's going on there. And I bring up the fact of these soldiers often not being characters because of this guy specifically. Like Vanguard First Blades, right? These are the first people into the fray. This guy is unusual in that he really has a face and he has a character to it. Not much of a character, he's kind of a bland white boy, but there's a character there. Unlike, for instance, this guy, where again, you barely even get to see his eyes, really. Which I like. Chiana Crownguard, by the way, is there. She's hanging out on the horse behind there. And what I like about this picture is, again, look at what they're doing with light. The soldiers, yeah, they're the subject of the picture. Like, they're in the foreground and stuff, but look who the light is favoring. Who the light is highlighting. It's Chiana Crownguard on her big-ass heroic horse back there, behind the front line, basically. Which I thought was interesting. Like, that is being used this way, because this guy's he's all kind of shoved away almost to the side up here. And this guy is like, yeah, he's there, but he's in a weird spot in the composition, so like, they're not really... None of these guys are really the main character of the image as such. Like, from a compositional standpoint, none of them take the central character standpoint. She does, but we can't see her. Like, we can't see her face, we can't see her expression. We can only see theirs. So there's an interesting... I don't know if it's intentional. Like, it might be a dissonant, it might be a mistake or a compositional error, but it's an interesting take on this particular kind of image. Oh, by the way, remember this girl? That's our girl Citria. Doing well on the battlefield. So there's a storyline with Citria, where we go from her at the gates of Demacia to her as a Vanguard Squire. Citria, Vanguard Squire. On a Noxian ship, or rather on a Demacian ship on the way to some kind of campaign. And then Citria as Citria the Bold, a commander in the Demacian army. And we're going to talk about this picture because there's some fucking amazing rendering going on here. And when you play Citria in-game, she has dialogue with Garen. Which I thought was lovely, like that he recognizes her as an important member of the Demacian army. And he knows her. So, Citria here, on the ship. And this is one of the rare scenes in the Demacian cards where there's really no action. Like, there's nothing happening. There's no war. There's no combat. It's just a quiet moment of her on a ship going somewhere. Going to find adventure or battle or to defend Demacia or whatever she's doing. And notice the color scheme, by the way. She's all brown. Like most Demacian soldiers we've seen are dressed in blue, but Citria is still dressed in the same brown that she wears when she first arrives in Demacia. Like, it's still that same brown drabness, and that doesn't go away until she becomes Citria the Bold, and then she's wearing the bright blue of Demacia. Then she's there. And that's a lovely progression in the artwork to get her from one point to the other and showing the transition in between. As people are pointing out in chat, yeah, she's also thin as hell. And that's a little bit of a... Like, because the obvious thing to do would be to have her arrive as this scrawny little thing, right? This scrawny little nothing of a girl. And then have her, like, grow up to be a bit more of a brick shithouse. Like, that would be the obvious way to do the story progression, but I kind of like that she's still small. Like, that she's still kind of small and fragile-looking and waspy. Like, I kind of like that. Like, that is kind of cool because it contrasts her really well with the soldiers that are riding past her. We'll talk more about her artwork specifically in a second. And again, highlighting the character, creating a framing where the character can exist in, and then everything else is just kind of... Oh, yeah, it's the Shadow Isles. You're right. People in the chat are right. It's the Shadow Isles. You can see the green. But again, as with so many Demacian characters, she's got the light behind her. Like, she's got the light lighting her up from behind, sanctifying her, lionizing her. And again, notice that the character isn't looking at us. She's looking away at something else, which is something I'm going to point out every time it happens, because I really like it. I like that as an aspect of storytelling. And then we have here, like, this is like the clearest example of Christian imagery being used that we've seen in a long time. This is literally an angel descending from heaven to stab the hordes of hell. Like, that's literally what's going on in this picture. She's also a Valkyrie. Like, there's also a lot of Valkyrie imagery going on with the spear and the... Like, and the crown thing going on, and then she's got the boot plate, which is like... But there's also that, but there's also angel imagery with the wings and with the light of heaven, like the heavens splitting open behind her, framing her in golden light as she descends upon the hordes of the unjust. Very much there. But she's beefy. Like, with her, you can see, holy shit, she's got some muscle packed in there. Like, this is a lady who can not only step on you, but, like, strap you to her feet and use you as shoes. Which is nice, because that's the kind of thing you would expect to see on a Guardian who, like, swings around a 200-pound sword, 200-pound spear on a daily basis. You need that core strength for that. And again, simple framing. You can see the framing of the light creating this point of interest in the middle, where which the character can then occupy, and then everything else. Like, you can see even they're applying some blur effects on the outlines of the picture to create this vignette with her in the central, in the center of the image. Yeah. And I like the color contrast, like that this is all, like, she's all golden and gold and brown and red, and the Shadow Isles people, of course, are all teal and black and gray and blue, which works really well. But mostly just, like, the obviousness of, like, the sky is opening up and the sun sanctifying her as she descends upon the enemy. It's almost like a lot of these, combat pictures, like, this is kind of like, this is like, almost like that photo of the soldiers raising the flag at Iwo Jima, right? Like, it's almost that kind of a thing. It's almost like they're propaganda pictures, a lot of them. Especially, like, this one could be a propaganda picture for joining the Demacian army, right? Like, this could be a painting that they would make to get young cadets to sign up. That kind of thing. And that's, again, that's something that fits very well with Demacia's militaristic and militant government style as well. And here, again, the individual soldier is not important. The soldier doesn't really matter. But the thing that he's a part of is important. The bird has more of a face than he does, really. Hell, we can't even tell if it's a guy, necessarily. Except he doesn't have boot plates. Must be a guy. But yeah, again, the lighting is doing a lot of the hard work of highlighting the characters. And you get this... You can see how the shape of the bird's body kind of cuts off this bit of the image and kind of makes us focus on the grand vista that they're flying through, as well as the characters themselves. And again, interestingly, if you if you grab this picture and zoom in on it, what you'll see when you really look at the back half of the bird, or like the rendering on the feathers that aren't that important, what the artist is doing is really almost nothing. Like, they're really just kind of dabbing at it, like making little strokes. Because this is the part of the image, like the bird's face and the soldier are the part of the image that draw the attention, and so they're the ones that need the most detail, the most work to look good in the particular image. I do wish they would make a Silverwing champion one day, like someone who's actually riding one of these big motherfuckers. That would be good. See, here is interesting because the soldier isn't the main character of this picture. The sword is, or the lance that he's wielding. This is the main character of the image. The weapon. The soldier just happens to be the dude holding it, but the weapon is the main character. And you can see that because of all the things we've discussed before. You can see the horse and the back of the tail creating a frame within which the sword is the main character. You can see the lighting up the sword, but not really lighting up the character behind him. So the sword is the main character of this particular image, which I think is really cool. Is it a lance? It can't be a lance. It's just one long blade. Sword lance? Lance sword? I don't know. The consequence of that, though, is that this part of the image, like pretty much all of this, is a little bit wasted. Like, it's a little bit like there's not... it's just like some horses, some blah. Like, there's nothing really going on here except... like the horse itself, which is clearly not important to the image. And that's kind of the danger of like using framings and using lighting to highlight specific things, because when you do it in a small area, the rest of the image is a little bit wasted. It's not a problem, really. It's just there were clearly opportunities to do more. Anyway, Citria the Bold. I love this image a lot. For two reasons, which I will tell you about once I've eaten some fries. And also dropped the fries on myself. Great. Oh, it fell into my trash can. Anyway, hello. We were talking about some artwork. So I like this picture a lot for two reasons. First of all, because it's just, like, look at the rendering on those horses and those soldiers. Like, they look badass as hell. Like, this is just, they're gorgeous. Like, this is, horses are fucking difficult. Horses are incredibly hard to draw. Those complicated motherfuckers. So that's, first of all, cool. Second of all, just look at the rendering. Like, the bright highlights on the silver armor, and the way that they use almost completely black shadows, contrasted with really bright lights to really give the sense of these shining cavalry riding forth. That's just really fucking cool. But the second thing I like is that this picture is the same picture as when Citria first enters the story. Look at it. Here, she's at the center of the frame, being framed by the light behind her, and by by the pillars, and by soldiers flanking her on either side. You can see soldiers like moving on either side of her, moving forward in front of her. And then for her final form, like for her ascension into a hero, it's the same composition, it's the same picture. Citria in the middle being framed by the light behind her, and soldiers moving forward about her to either side. It's like, that's just good. That is good, consistent visual storytelling. And it fucking rules. So that's fucking awesome. And then there's the, like someone pointed out in chat, the floor almost looks like clouds, like, right? And we talked about how Demacia incorporates a lot of Christianized imagery, like a lot of the heavens opening up, a lot of the golden light of the sun as a sanctifying halo around the heads of the righteous and stuff like that. That's happening here too. Like, she's basically leading an army of angels, as it were. Like, it's kind of that imagery that's being implied. And that's, I think it's just really cool. Like, it's really well done within the idea of the picture. It's really fun. I also like that she's got scars on her face now. I can't zoom in on it in the client, but you can see that she's got a little scar on her cheek, just sort of evidence of the battle that she's been through. Moving on to someone substantially less sympathetic, this asshole. A mage seeker once again with the half mask over his head. And framing again, you can see the framing of the windows behind him that kind of center him in the image, but they also center him in a position of power. Because clearly he's representative of the building itself, like of the authority of the construction that they're within. He's in a position of power in the room. And he's lording over this guy here, who's presumably accused of being a mage or something along those lines. Like, this is like a witch finder or something, accusing someone of being a witch or consorting with the devil. And you can really see, like, the anger and the disdain and the, like, just the hatefulness on display in this guy's face. Like, you can see that this is not someone who brooks an argument. This is not someone you can talk to. It's like, he looks like an angry gamer YouTuber. Yeah, a thumbnail with, like, feminists are ruining League of Legends. Oh, God, that's funny. Okay. Man. But anyway, again, very well composed. And I really like, especially, look at the faces of the characters in the background. Like, they stand behind him, which leaves this guy, even though he's so big in the frame, like he's like almost like a fifth of the picture over here. This guy feels alone. This guy feels like he's got people backing him up, people behind him. Which again it cements him in a position of power over the other. Which is just really effectively done. The one thing I would have liked more is if the staff was pointed in an accusatory fashion more at us, more at the audience, because that would put us more in the perspective of the guy being accused. Like, that would put us more in an adversarial position, which I think would work better for the dynamic that's being set up here. This guy's the enemy. Like, this is a bad guy in this picture. He's above you. He's looking down on you. So that would be, I think that would be a little bit better. Speaking of characters looking down on others, hello, Tiana Crown Guard. The Karen of all Karens. Tiana Crown Guard. Finally, we get to see her outside of the Lux comic. And again, you can see the same compositional tricks being employed with the Mage Seeker Persuader, right? Like, where the building is kind of focused on him, and he's in a position of power raised over the subject. Alpha Karen! Oh man, I love you guys, chat. Holy shit, the Alpha Karen. Anyway, again, in a position of power over Lux, you can see how the building bends towards her. All the lines of the building kind of radiate her power, her position of power, her dominance. Mega Karen, the raid boss. And you can see that she's got, like, her chin is slightly raised, just a little bit. She's raised her chin a little, and she's really looking down, very directly down on Lux here in the foreground. And you do get that adversarial kind of dangerous sense from her. Also, of course, if you have read the Lux comic, you know that this girl wears, like, 8-inch heels. So that's probably why she's so freaking tall, but that's definitely part of it. And the shoulder pauldrons as well. I almost get the sense from the shoulder pauldrons that they're a little bit like those power pauldrons that you'd see on stereotypical businesswomen from the 80s, right? Those huge shoulder pauldrons things that sort of were symbols of girl power from the 80s, that back then. It feels like they're kind of doing the same thing with the pauldrons here, that she's sort of asserting wide-shouldered dominance over the entire space, which I quite like. But the thing I really want to draw attention to in this picture is, see what's going on back there? I think, and I can't be sure, but I think in this picture, we are in the Crown Guard residence, and Lux is having a conversation with Mega Karen over here. And I think this might be a hagiographic image of Lux actually leading some Demacian soldiers out of danger. But this is kind of what I was talking about. You know, I remember how I talked about, like, Demacia as Christian hagiography, and as sort of using this Christian religious imagery a lot in the inspirations for their stuff. This mural right here is taken, like, fucking directly out of a chapel in the Vatican. Like, that's directly what this looks like. This looks directly like something someone would have paid Leonardo da Vinci to scribble on a wall back in like the Renaissance. And I like that that's being implemented here. And it also gives us more of a sense of Demacian culture, like that Demacians do actually have pictures and fun sometimes. All of their walls aren't just bright white all the time. There's art there too, which is a lovely little world building detail that I enjoy. And so we reach the end of Demacia with the Bright Steel formation. And here again, light is being used very efficiently, but take a look at what's actually going on with the characters in this image. Take a look at the characters. We have one guy here whose face we can see, and we get this sense of, like, grit and determination and stuff from him. Everyone else, helmet slightly there, but everyone else is a shield and a sword. That's all they are. Every single other character in this image is a shield and a sword, and nothing more. Someone says Silverwing Scout in the background. I don't think that's the Silverwing Scout from the previous image. It could be, because it seems to be the same battle. Like, we see a lot of the same projectiles being fired around, but I can't see a rider. So I'm not sure it's the same Silverwing Scout. But, like, again, like, the soldier itself, the person, is being reduced to only their weapon and their shield, which again is very common in imagery of, like, in propaganda imagery about armies and joining up and stuff like that. So that's very much on display here. So, that was Demacia. I am going to take myself a 5-minute break. I'm gonna get myself some water, and I will be back shortly. To talk to you guys a little bit more. Let me just get a bit of text up on... so that you guys can see. And I'll be back in a second, and we'll move on to Freljord or Piltover. I'll figure it out by then.